Hi, this is Dana Gardner, Principal Analyst at Inter Arbor Solutions, and you're listening to Briefings Direct. Predicting the future took on a whole new degree of difficulty in the past 2 years, and while we can't always know what Mother Nature throws our way, we can learn from what worked and what didn't work in 2021. Clearly, adjusting swiftly to persistent change and leveraging digital and often virtual tools, environments, and processes were major benefits. So how will 2022 shape up as we extrapolate on the trends around shifting work models? How will technology, both tactically and strategically, improve the ways businesses operate and enable employees to remain productive and content regardless of where they are? Stay with us now as we explore the ways work itself continues to be reinvented, while at the same time, digital technologies enhance and disrupt the means through which we all collaborate and operate in our jobs. To learn more about the ways that 2022 will set the stage for the next decade of innovation and adaptation, please join me now in welcoming our guests. We're here with Christian Riley, Vice President and Head of Technology Strategy Organization at Citrix. Welcome, Christian.
Thank you for having me.
We're glad you're here. We're also here with Tim Minahan, Executive Vice President of Business Strategy and Chief Marketing Officer at Citrix. Welcome back, Tim.
Thanks, Dana. It's great to be here.
Tim, do you see the speed and how work models are evolving and maturing slowing at all in 2022? Have we reached some sort of plateau here?
Not at all, Dana. In fact, the old adage that necessity is the mother of innovation is certainly holding true here. All of the unplanned investments that organizations have made over the past 2 years to really accommodate for secure remote work have torn down barriers and really given way to new ways of operating that's going to continue to fuel unprecedented levels of innovation and growth in the year and years ahead. If you think about it, when the pandemic hit, companies had to find new ways to operate. They had to invest in new technologies. And it really took decades worth of steps forward, not only innovating on how they work internally, but how they engage with customers through new digital channels. And the technology they use to digitize their business to survive have given ways to new business models and new paces of innovation across every industry, from a dramatic increase in the role of telemedicine and remote clinics to virtual learning and to, as we're hearing now, the Metaverse that's really going to enable them to thrive in the new year ahead and beyond.
Tim, what have we learned from the past year or two in how these reinvention of work solutions have accelerated? What did we know worked and maybe what didn't?
Well, you think about it, companies were forced to do two things. Number one, they were forced to accelerate the digitization of their business, whether that is, financial services industries, increasing remote and digital financial advisory services, trading services, whether that was retail, further accelerating the use of digital channels, whether that was healthcare, like we just mentioned, rethinking the ways in which they engage and provide patient care. But the second thing is that it also caused both employers and employees to rethink work, to break down the old taboos that work can only happen, while in the office. Both employers have recognized the benefits that remote work plays, not only in keeping their existing employees engaged and the like, but being able to reach new talent pools that are well beyond commuting distance to one of their work hubs or office centers. And employees have recognized that, hey, I can actually do creative and innovative work when not in the office. In fact, I actually may even be able to be more creative and innovative because I have time, uninterrupted time to really focus in on solving business problems and not having to deal with all the other headaches and distractions that come with long commutes, travel, etc. And I can still now make better use of technology to foster more efficient work execution and collaboration wherever work needs to get done.
So, Tim, some people seem to think that the best case scenario here is we get back to 2019, to the way things were. Why is that really not likely to happen in any way, shape, or form when it comes to how we work?
I think the two dynamics that we mentioned. One is we've broken down the taboos about what constitutes work, where it needs to get done, and who does the work, right? Many of these employees have recognized that they can be selective about the jobs they take and with which organizations. Similarly, many companies are beginning to evolve to much more of a blend between full-time employees or FTEs and contractors, especially for those hard to find skill sets that are required interestingly enough, to digitize and modernize their business. Things like AI, analytics, cloud, et cetera, security, that are often hard to find in a full-time employee basis. But when the contract between employers and employees shifts and employees are looking to select those jobs that they want, looking to hone their skills and be an independent, that really opens up new opportunities both for employers and employees.
All right. Well, so Christian, if we're entering into this bold new era of work and there's no going back, why is the timing good from a technology standpoint? Why is technology in a better position than ever to support such a work model adaptation shift?
Well, I think primarily there's just so much choice, right? If you look around the technology sphere, the speed that technology finds its way into organizations, and it's not always by IT, of course, right? A lot of that technology that comes in is very much a demand that's served from the end users and the employees themselves. If we step back a little bit and just say, how quickly were we able to apply technology to what I've now lovingly called the world's greatest semi-coordinated remote work experiment? I don't use the word pandemic anymore, but if you really think about it, every organization on the planet was challenged from day one of the lockdown to say, okay, well, the technology that we had and we'd employed really wasn't intended to support this kind of work, the very work that Tim was talking about, that was really forced upon us. It wasn't really choice. It was a mandate due to the global lockdown. So I think if you see how quickly we were able to respond to that with a variety of different technologies that actually serve to prove that remote work for the most part really does work, I think it's a great time to be in tech, and it's a great time for organizations to actually maybe just sort of step back themselves and think about what is it that we achieved, and what else could we achieve, knowing that our traditional barriers and the department of no that most IT organizations have been historically has to be turned on its head. And I think being able to take that approach and using the tip of the spear of the people in the business who want to suggest and bring the technologies, I think has given us a huge, huge opportunity to change the way that we think about supply and demand across every industry.
So there is no such thing as the new normal. We can just get rid of normal. But the new what? What's the new, if you will, Christian?
I've always called it the new now. I mean, I think if you go back even just a few months where the world was kind of slowly coming out of the pandemic and locations and offices and countries were beginning to reopen, I think if you use the word normal in that context, I really don't think that it treats us equally. If you think about the way that the pandemic affected everybody around the world, it's impacted us all differently. So I think referring to that as normal, it really doesn't reflect a number of those differences. And if you take that into a sort of a socio-economic piece as well as work, it really doesn't do enough, in my opinion, to actually reflect the differences that we see across things like genders and opportunity and whatever, because normal doesn't reflect what we've been through in the last couple of years. And so I think if we think about it as now, what it also does is put us in a different mindset about what we saw most companies who've been successful through the pandemic was about agility, being able to shapeshift, being able to put their resources to work in different ways quickly to address different work challenges. I think if we suggest that that's normal, I think it gives us potentially kind of like maybe a box to put ourselves in that might limit our thinking and creativity. So I like to think about things in a fluid way. We really certainly haven't seen a strategy from a single company that's going to be the blueprint for everybody going forward. So I think just treating almost every day as a new now leaves us as kind of humans in organizations open to the things that we do really well, right? Which is creativity, innovation, thinking outside the box. So I much prefer to think about that in terms of various phases of evolution post-pandemic, which have accelerated many things, whether that be on the technology or business change, which is all very positive. So I think normal is probably a little bit too harsh a word for what we've been through and what we can expect for the next few years.
And Christian, if we're entering this new era and technology is so foundational to making it vibrant and innovative, why is this such a good time then to be a provider of IT? Has there ever been a better time to be in the IT business? It seems like we're foundational and essential to the highest degree.
Oh, absolutely. I think from the changes that we saw happening before the pandemic with, organizations moving to cloud and changing their application portfolios and changing the where and the how and the why, as Tim explained about how work gets done. There's always been a technology underpinning of that. And if you're in the technology industry, you've got to be pretty happy with lots of opportunity for change, right? I think for many, many years, it was difficult for people in organizations to drive change, to challenge status quo in organizations large and small. But I think as technologists, we always like to look out and try and invent the future. And it was difficult to do that when the rest of the business was really kind of in a catch-up mode or didn't see the value of technology as an investment to actually drive the business as opposed to being a necessary evil. So I think we've leveled the playing field, both with the choice that we have in technology, the time it takes to embed technology and the relatively short time now that it takes to get a return from that investment. And I think it's great. And we're seeing examples in our customers, seeing examples around the world of organizations who are really, really putting technology strategies at the forefront of their business strategy. And if I think back to my nearly 30 years in this industry, I can't imagine or remember a time where it's more exciting for us to really combine the technology with the business opportunity to drive some really, really great outcomes going forward.
And Tim, for the business leaders out there who are also responding to this change, what is your research telling you? How are they viewing this? Are they as optimistic as we are or seeing this as impactful as we do?
Yeah, indeed, Dana, going back to my earlier statement, business leaders are really viewing this moment in time and the investments they've made to support advanced digitization and engagement with their customers and in remote or hybrid work models as a platform for driving a new level of innovation. In fact, we at Citrix recently conducted a research project in partnership with Coleman Parks, interviewing 1,200 some odd business leaders across the U.S. and Europe. And, on average, these leaders attribute almost half of their growth over the past year to new innovations, new products, new service lines, new ways of working, fueled by the adoption of the new technologies and the work models that we're talking about here. In fact, according to the study, investments in new technology and flexible work models over the past several years have fueled $678 billion in new revenues across these industries. And 69% of those business leaders around the world say they're going to increase investment in R&D over the next 12 months to really sustain this growth, because they've taken part of the growth had been constrained by our biased thinking. We were taking, as Christian just said, longer journeys to the cloud. Not anymore. Companies are accelerating the digitization of their business, including the shift to the cloud, taking that 3-year cloud transformation project and doing it in 3 months because they need that agility. They see what's available to them. Same thing with work models. They're removing the taboos associated traditionally with working remotely and using that to turn it on its head and rethink entire work models. Where work gets done certainly is the dialogue we're having in the market. Should employees go back to the office or work remotely continually? But it's more like how work gets done. Are we fostering them with a digital workspace environment that allows them to work anywhere and be as productive and as secure, no matter whether they're in an office building or whether they're on the road? And then who does the work? This is the most exciting part. Being able to have access to new talent pools, being able to drive greater equitable and responsible hiring practices within your business, because you're no longer constrained about where your office buildings are. And just 2 quick examples. I mentioned the healthcare sector is one area that's really been advancing, not just telemedicine, but also introducing, new remote clinics that are more closer to where the patients are. A great example is, Mass General Brigham in your hometown there, Dana, in Boston, just before the COVID crisis had transitioned to the cloud, which really allowed them to not only ensure that their 70,000 physicians, clinicians, and administrators could work safely and remotely, but being much more responsive to the needs that have arisen during the pandemic. Being able to, for example, open up a remote clinic at the Boston Convention Center, literally in 3 days per order of the governor, because using that same technology platform, they were able to do that very, very quickly. Being able to increase their telemedicine visits by more than 27 times. And they don't see that going fully back to the way it was before. And then finally, being able to use this platform now to have greater access to experts, oncologists, For example, in Minnesota, they don't necessarily need to live in the Boston area to be able to sustain this. That's just one great example of an industry and a leader in that industry that's not going back. They're using the investments they made in technology. They're using the investments they made in work models to fuel new ways of patient care or new ways of innovation for their business.
And Christian, if we're moving past the shackles that confined us through remote work as a stepping stone to something else, the new how we do work seems to be a big opportunity for 2022. How did some of the technology trends that are also maturing at this time help support that? I'm thinking perhaps 3G connectivity, edge, parallel internets. What's happening at the cusp of technology that's going to support and even enhance this process of reinventing work in 2022?
I think, Dana, to the point you made there about the networking, I think maybe it's kind of the unsung hero of what we saw in the pandemic. If you take a look at what happened with the number of people being asked to work remotely, locked out of physical locations, the fact that the demands for bandwidth were essentially catered for around the world speaks a lot to the underpinning of the infrastructure, and I think if you think about this world of hyper connectivity and the world of always on, and we've been talking about this for a number of years as well, of course. You think about the advancements in 5G technology, the speed that comes with that, the capacity that comes with that. We've got all sorts of different providers building their own undersea capacity across the world as well, just to carry the demand. It's incredible. You could go back a decade and I don't think we would have been able to do what we've done in the last 18 months, 2 years, had we been working with the constraints around the networking technologies from a decade ago. So I think if you make an assumption now that they're really, in the next probably couple of years, there'll be no such thing as never connected, whether you're on an airplane, whether you're on a train, whether you're on, in your own car or in a coffee shop or whatever. There's the ubiquitous connectivity is going to be the thing that powers a lot of this next generation of economy. And so if you kind of think about that, then think about what we tend to talk about next on top of networking is obviously security, which is important. But then we talk about performance, reliability, availability. I think what we'll see is that the folks out there who want to be the places where all the world's applications and data are served from, so the huge cloud providers that we have, I made a comment a few months ago about them building parallel internets, right? So if you think about, obviously the traditional internet is a number of different carriers interconnected at various points around the world in internet exchanges and so on, where the name of the game there is kind of exchanging data from a peering perspective where there's some kind of equity between the transactions. And if you're a commercial customer in there, you can buy bandwidth from there and you can sort of act like a carrier to one respect. But if you really think about what goes on in the IX, there's a question about how can we fairly exchange data that means that nobody loses out from a cost perspective. Now, think about what we're seeing now, where the Googles, the Microsofts, the Amazons, all building these giant networks of their own so that they can, essentially offer better reliability, better performance, better availability, loads of different points of presence around the world, some carried on subsea, some carried on terrestrial technologies. I think what we're seeing there is a huge, huge sea change in the way that we think about carriers. If you want to be able to get your application served by the best network in the world, you may be looking at different providers, i.e. the big hyperscaler cloud providers than perhaps we looked at a decade ago. So I think there's a significant element to that, which has an upstream effect on where organizations choose to place their cloud services and the data and applications, of course. Think about that from a sort of a wireless perspective. We've been talking about ubiquitous connectivity for IoT for many, many years. I think, we're seeing the evolution of that now with opportunities in edge. Lots and lots of workloads will continue to be delivered by edge because that last mile connectivity that we used to struggle with will sort of disappear with the continued rollouts of 5G and the availability of that around the world. And what really excites me about that is what happens in developing nations. You kind of think about the Western world, and we've been very fortunate to be on a journey from different types of networking, which in some cases has had to be built and rebuilt and built on top of, existing physical infrastructure, cell towers and physical fiber and so forth. I think if you think about that for the opportunities of the developing world, they don't come with that set of problems. So doing net new build outs in there actually, I think, will give rise to some real economic growth in areas of the world that were perhaps a little bit disadvantaged historically. So I'm really actually excited about again, back to the level playing field, that these types of things that we make as investments as the industry across networking actually drive some really important economic effects and some social interactions for countries that have not been able to participate in a global economy because they've been held back by the physical infrastructure. So I think it's super exciting. And if you look 5 years from now, will we be looking at the GDPs of countries differently by virtue of the fact that they're now hyper-connected and have much more opportunity than they've had historically?
Well, Tim, it seems that the good news is we look forward and try to make some predictions is the technology is significantly enabling things that hadn't been possible. At the same time, we can provide a clean slate and reinvent work, having moved past former taboos, as you point out. But the bad news is that's a lot of uncharted territory. It seems like a lot of options is sometimes more difficult than fewer options. So what are the challenges that companies, businesses need to overcome in order to make the most of this unique, unprecedented, you might say, situation without falling into a sense of being overwhelmed or being unsure of how to move and therefore become paralyzed?
Very good point, Dana. There are some choppy waters that people need to navigate because it is uncharted waters, as you mentioned. But I think the biggest risk that companies are going to need to grapple with in the coming year ahead is this concept of hybrid work, right fit for right role. The opportunity of hybrid work is pretty tremendous, as we mentioned, in the sense that employees are liberated to work wherever they can possibly do their best work. Employers now have the opportunity to tap into new talent pools that are well beyond commuting distance to one of their physical office hubs. But the real challenge is how do you create an equitable work environment regardless of where employees are located, right? Hybrid by its very definition means we're going to have employees that are in the office collaborating and executing work together with employees that are not in the office. And there's a real risk of creating a tiered level of the employee base or level of inequity in the employee base if you kind of default back to that office first culture. And so I know many of our customers and Citrix itself is looking at, okay, what does the environment need to look like to be conducive to capitalizing on the benefits of hybrid work? And one is certainly, just like we did decades ago, we made big investments in physical office buildings and creating collaboration spaces and the like. Well, if work is happening everywhere at the same time and employees are distributed across physical locations and remote locations, that means we need to create a digital work environment, a digital workplace that provides equitable access to the tools that employees need to be productive, their applications, their content, their collaboration tools, regardless of where they are. To Christian's point, right? They need that network reliability so that the applications are not only available, performing the way they should. They need the security capabilities so that the company has confidence that their information is secure no matter where an employee is doing work from, whether that's in an office or on the road or as we're all seeing from home. But that needs to be coupled with processes and cultural and policy changes that foster a more equitable work environment, that it isn't just an office first or remote first culture. It's truly a hybrid culture. And then finally, your physical workspaces need to adapt. They need to be purpose built for their use. If the physical office becomes a place where we come together to collaborate and the like, we need to kind of retrofit our rooms to facilitate inclusion of those that are working remotely. So I know at Citrix, for example, we are utilizing the Teams environment and retrofitting our conference rooms with 360-degree cameras, with cameras on the whiteboard, so that regardless of where an employee is, we are taking some of the equitable work policies that came with remote work and bringing them into a hybrid work world, right? So everyone has similar access to information. Everyone has similar opportunity to voice their opinion and creativity in a meeting. And these are the types of things that folks are going to need to navigate through in the months ahead if they're going to really capitalize on the benefits of what hybrid work can deliver.
So if we're using hybrid work as the starting point and we don't exactly know where we're going to end up on the other side, do we have any examples that we can look to for positives and negatives? I'm thinking about the gig economy and gig workers. Tim, was there something about the gig economy that was a bellwether for what we should expect of hybrid work models, or what went wrong with gig that we can learn from as well?
Well, again, I think even when the gig economy emerged, we were still in very much a mindset of a work environment that hasn't changed pretty much since Henry Ford, right? It's an extension of the Industrial Revolution where everyone came together in a manufacturing facility. Well, when we went to knowledge workers, we just kind of adopted that work structure that said, well, everyone, of course, should come together in an office environment. What the opportunity affords us right now, removing the taboos, having the technological infrastructure to support equitable work across all environments and domains, is the opportunity to go with a new class of, if you will, gig with benefits that provides flexibility and autonomy to freelance, gives them that autonomy that the contract and gig workers crave, along with the stability that's become increasingly attractive as the pandemic wears on by being associated with a given employer with appropriate benefits and everything that comes with being a full-time employee. And so I think we're seeing literally people redrafting what the social contract is between employers and employees for the very first time in decades.
And Christian, one of the nice things technologically that we can do now as we go about this definition of what hybrid work can and should be, we have at our disposal analytics tools at scale and at costs that are very attractive. So how do we move to understand the best models of the future without it just being trial and error? How do we apply the best of what analytics and even automation can bring so that we can get to that right definition for the right company at the right time, make it highly specialized even? What else can technology do for us in the next few years when it comes to helping us through an experimental process?
I'll start and I'll let Christian jump in because I know this is a passion of his. But ultimately, over the past several years, we've seen the introduction of both, we'll call it machine learning rather than AI, but AI or machine learning and analytics into the workplace, along with automation. And those two things have fundamentally changed the ways in which we work. Number one, clearing a lot of the noise from an employee's day and guiding them to the next task, the next insight that's valuable to move them along the process. But number two, it's elevated the skill set and the employee and performance of every employee so that they're performing at their best, whether they're 6 months on the job or whether they're your employee of the month consistently for the past 6 years. Really using technology to guide employees to delivering the best customer service, delivering the best answer, to execute processes even faster. And I'll give you a quick example during the pandemic, getting back to necessity is the mother of innovation. City National Bank, one of our customers out of Florida, had adopted our digital workspace technologies, not only to ensure that they could deliver the applications and tools that employees need in a very secure environment, but also began to utilize some of the machine learning and automation or workflow capabilities to kind of break down some of the steps they needed for the mortgage loan review process. As a result, they knitted together some of the key tasks and insights across multiple systems, CRM systems, mortgage loan systems, approval systems. And really, the system was then guiding the employee to the next step in the process, pulling information from other databases and the like. And they were able to process 6 years of loans in 6 months during the pandemic. It's just some examples of how bringing together AI or machine learning together with automation is really fundamentally creating a new level of skill set, particularly at a time when we have such a global talent shortage, especially for certain skills, right? This technology could fill the skills gap that many companies are suffering through right now.
Christian, what's your take? How will machine learning and the analytics capabilities we have, along with automation, help us attain a new, better place when it comes to work processes, definition of work?
I think it's a great question, and one that, to me, has sort of multiple answers, right? If you think about, as Tim was mentioning, the skills gap, it's kind of a paradox, right? Because we talk about the skills gap and how we're going to address that and how we address that with technology and applying, whether it's software robots or automated workforce to fill some of those gaps. And yet the other side of the coin will be concerns about how much of this technology comes in and actually replaces physical workers, right? You go back to Tim's Henry Ford example of many years ago, there was an argument there about automation in the automotive manufacturing industry that was replacing the physical workforce. And that's something that we've talked about and we've discussed and we've sort of politicized on for many years. I think the real question there to me is how many more jobs does this technology create, right? So that's the bit that we don't really ever talk about. And I don't think we have a good opinion on. I think if you take it from a pure technology perspective, I think perhaps the most fascinating element of what we're seeing here is I'd put that in the category of democratization. If you go back far enough, you could say that there are examples of when things like Microsoft Office first found its way into organizations. It kind of democratized word processing or letter creation to the detriment of the classic typing pool, right? If you remember that from many years ago. So I think if you follow that path of democratization, what we're seeing through the evolution of citizen developers, of low-code, no-code platforms, the exact things that Tim was talking about in terms of bringing the technology to augment the workforce. What I think we're seeing very rapidly is that both in the worlds of low-code, no-code, of citizen development, and also of machine learning in general, the democratization of that, literally being able to take off-the-shelf components and off-the-shelf products and off-the-shelf services and apply them in a business context. And I think the key to that is being able to enable the line of business people who deeply understand what the data needs to do for them. They understand the business process inside out. They understand the workflows inside out. They're far better placed to deal with that than traditional IT and traditional developers. And I think the speed at which the technologies are becoming democratized, you think about for a few cents an hour, you can have machine learning services running in public cloud. And then those very same machine learning services to an extent are also finding the way onto client-side applications. I think it becomes very obvious very quickly that just in the way that we've seen, with the changing work demographic, the younger generation coming in as analysts in business, but being able to write algorithms in Python or whatever it is, or the language of their choice that they learned at school. I think we're going to continue to see that. And what we'll see is much smarter applications being put to work. I think the challenge there is it potentially creates more data silos than it solves initially, because we're writing these sort of point solutions and these machine learning constructs and algorithms that solve particular problems. So there's a challenge there. I think, we've got enough problems as it is with Tim's favorite word of cloud sprawl and application sprawl. I think we're likely to see more of that as organizations empower individuals to really be productive by bringing their own technology to work and using these off-the-shelf components to enhance those technologies, creating personal applications. A few years ago, we used to talk about bring your own device, bring your own identity. I don't think it'll be very long before we talk about bring your own application, and that'll be largely due to the democratization of the technologies that we've seen that power these new generation of applications and insights.
Well, Christian, we're almost out of time, but I wanted to touch on one last issue. And Tim brought it up at the very beginning, and it's this idea of not just having physical or remote, but having perhaps a third-party reality that we can look to enhance work. So the metaverse, virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality. Where do you see, Christian, the opportunity for us to begin the journey from a business perspective in 2022 for using this concept of a new third-party entity environment to solve some of the issues that we've been dealing with?
Well, I think, I'll use Tim's phrase again, right, about necessity being the mother of innovation and in some cases the mother of invention. If you go back a few years, we've seen very steady technological growth in virtual reality, augmented reality and mixed reality, as you mentioned. And yet we've never really seen sort of the killer application. Plenty of examples of customers and companies that are using those technologies to solve certain things, but we've never seen mass adoption, in the way that we've seen it in other technologies. And I think as humans, we've kind of always been fascinated by things like the Jetsons and time travel and teleportation. We've seen it in science fiction movies forever. But I think if you start to think about some of the other things that are part of metaverse, whether it's digital twins or maybe more photorealistic, more immersive worlds, it's pretty easy, I think, if you let your imagination go there, to understand how, some of the things that we've been or being found very difficult to replace during the pandemic, which is the kind of the human interaction. How do I feel like I'm in more than just two dimensions, looking through a laptop screen or a monitor, with a number of other people on a video call of some sort? I think there's a lot more to it than that. And if we could really figure out how we can sort of transcend a physical boundary by, a virtual world, and I'm not talking like Second Life here, I'm talking much more where the office is not a building per se. It's much more of a virtual construct that has all the things that I need to get done within that, whether that be signing contracts using distributed ledger or collaborating in more of a sort of a physical way with a representation of myself in a metaverse. And, it's kind of, I always find it interesting if you think about those things, we maybe look at them as science fiction, and yet if you kind of look in the consumer world and you look to where the younger generation is, plenty of examples of kids using technologies like Minecraft and Roblox and these other things that are their own virtual worlds where they learn to collaborate, they learn to play by the rules of that particular game, and they learn how to immerse themselves in that to collaborate and to do tasks. I don't think that it's a million miles away from the reality of where we may end up in terms of the hybrid work that Tim talked about, but trying very hard to replace those physical interactions that we've missed and that aren't always possible on different sides of the world. I think there's a huge amount of opportunity there for us to actually think about the metaverse as much more of a business enabler underpinned by lots of different technologies, but maybe trying to bring that more personal interaction with it as we, establish this new now going forward.
And Tim, how does the current generation of digital workspaces and the progeny of those workspaces that we'll start to see in 2022 help us get to that vision that Christian just painted of a multiverse for business?
It goes without saying that the only constant we're going to have in this world of hybrid work is going to be the digital workspace within which we access the work resources, we access our content and insights that we need to make decisions, and we engage and collaborate with our peers, both within our company and outside it. And so digital workspaces has been something we've been talking about for quite some time. The need to ensure reliably and securely delivering the work resources that employees need to get their best work done wherever that needs to happen. It is the pandemic, if there's one small silver lining to it all, it is that it's rapidly accelerated digital transformation and opened people's eyes to this new way of working. And so as we look at the digital workspace technologies that underpin them, you're going to see not just ensuring reliable, high-performant access and secure access to the work resources you need, but a lot of these new kind of AI and automation agents being incorporated within the workspace to ensure that everyone can indeed perform at their best and not just be distracted by the technologies, but can harness them to drive greater creativity, and innovation. I'll just close by kind of where I started. Crisis-driven adaptation has not just transformed organizations, but it's kind of altered the mindset of both the employer and the employee. And I'm particularly positive and optimistic about what the future holds over the coming year and the next few years ahead. I think we're reaching a new plateau as all these items are converging at once. The technology is there and available. The taboos that have hindered our ability to reasons for adopting that technology have been torn away. And there is a new mindset both in the mind of employees and employers that are going to set us on a course to engage through new digital means and to work in new and more hybrid ways.
And Tim, Citrix has done an awful lot of research and is helping organizations understand this progression. Where can people go to learn more? How is Citrix making some of that information available?
Yeah, certainly. You can always go to citrix.com. We also have a full kind of thought leadership platform called Fieldwork, in which we not only promote and make available all the research studies and benchmarks that I mentioned, but also use it as an open platform for dialogue among leaders, in businesses as well as the IT organizations.
Well, great. I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there. You've been listening to a sponsored Briefings Direct discussion on how 2022 will shape up as we extrapolate on the trends around shifting work models and take us to the next level. And we've learned how speed will only increase in how digital technologies enhance and disrupt the means through which we all collaborate and operate in our jobs and lives. So a big thank you to our guests. We've been here with Christian Riley, Vice President and Head of Technology Strategy Organization at Citrix. Thank you so much, Christian.
Thank you, Dana. It was a pleasure.
And we've also been here with Tim Minahan, Executive Vice President of Business Strategy and Chief Marketing Officer at Citrix. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Dana. I appreciate the dialogue.
And a big thank you as well to our audience for joining this Briefings Direct Future of Work Innovation discussion. I'm Dana Gardner, Principal Analyst at Inter Arbor Solutions, your host throughout this series of Citrix-sponsored interviews. Thanks again for listening. Please pass this along to your community and do come back next time.